Can you think of a time in the Bible when an angel with a sword in his hand stood on the edge of a garden land? I can think of at least a couple. Now, we're not told if the commander of the army of the Lord had a flaming sword in his hand, like the one guarding the Garden of Eden, but the parallel between those two passages is plain enough without that. Israel is standing on the edge of that garden land, ready to enter into that which is promised to them. And the relevant question for them is not, God, are you for us? But rather, Israel, are you for or are you with God? Are you on his side? Because if you're not, you are going to deal with the sword of exile just like Adam did. But for now, this angelic being and possibly even a pre-incarnate Christ assures Israel that God himself will fight for them. He will be the invisible agent behind all of their victories as they go through the promised land. And nowhere is this more clear than in the Battle of Jericho, chapter 6. But honestly, is the word battle even appropriate for this chapter? I mean, it's more of a worship service, isn't it? Let's remind ourselves of this battle. You shall march around the city, Yahweh says. Go around it once, and do that for 6 days. And then the 7 priests will bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. And on that 7th day, march around 7 times. And then the priests will blow their trumpets. The people will shout a loud shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. The commander of the army of the Lord is going to swing his sword against the walls of Jericho. And when they fall down, those walls, the people of Israel are commanded that the city and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. And this word in Hebrew, devote to destruction, is herem. It's an important word for the book of Joshua, albeit a difficult one. Let's look at it in first instance here in verse 17, just so you can see what it looks like in Hebrew. Cherem, that which is banned, that which should be devoted to destruction. And it denotes a special kind of warfare whereby Israel cannot profit from foreign objects or cities or persons that are taken in battle. Rather, those things, they belong to God. They are devoted to God, and they must either be destroyed or enter into his temple treasury. Therefore, it makes sense that pagan temples, high places, shrines, idols, all those things need to be destroyed. We understand that. But entire populations as well, kill all of the Canaanites, that's a little bit harder to stomach. Let's look at some of the passages where we're told that the Canaanites should themselves be devoted to destruction. Here in Deuteronomy chapter 2, this is looking back to the battle of Sihon in Numbers 21, where it says that we captured all of the cities at that time, devoted them to destruction, herem, every city, men, women, and children. We left no survivors. Look at chapter 20. This is the warfare chapter in the book of Deuteronomy, which says that the cities of this people that the Lord is giving you, you shall save alive nothing that breathes, but you shall devote them to complete destruction, which is certainly what they did in Jericho. For it says that the city and all that is within it shall be devoted to destruction. Men, women, young, old, oxen, sheep, donkeys, everything. This is difficult. We left none remaining. We left none remaining, repeated again and again in a battle summary here in Joshua chapter 12. This content is certainly it's the greatest ethical challenge in the book of Joshua, if not the entire Bible. And personally, I can make no promises to erase the horror and even the revulsion that we feel when we read texts like this. But what I can and will attempt to do is to place these texts in their context and to perhaps give you some theological perspective on how to understand the conquest and some of the language that's used to describe it. Ultimately, the bedrock, what we have to start with is that God, he is both the creator and the righteous judge of everyone who's ever lived. He has the absolute right of ownership over everyone. In Psalm 24, verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell in it, the Canaanites included. And the fact is, no one who's ever lived has deserved God's mercy. The Canaanites didn't. I don't deserve God's mercy. You don't deserve God's mercy. And think about this. From Hebrews chapter 9, we're told that it is appointed for man to die once and then face judgment. And you know what? God gets to decide when that's going to happen. He decides when every individual is going to breathe their last breath. He's the one who makes that decision. And for the Canaanites here in 1400 BC, that final judgment, which is going to come on all the guilty, it just came a little bit early. And specifically, the Bible is going to tell us that the Canaanite culture was particularly guilty. Take a look at this. Passages which we've gathered highlighting the wickedness of Canaanite culture. God told Abraham 400 years before Joshua came on the scene that the iniquity of the Amorites, those who were in the promised land, it's growing and growing. It's getting worse and worse and worse. But there's going to come a day when their wickedness will be so complete, when we'll reach such a measure that it must be dealt with. And that time had come in the book of Joshua. Moses tells that same generation, Joshua's generation, that it's not because of the righteousness of the Israelites that Yahweh is giving them the land. No. It is because of the wickedness of those nations that Yahweh is driving them out from before you. And what kind of wickedness are we talking about? Leviticus 18 lists a whole series of specifically sexual sins, which it labels as abominations. And it is for these abominations that the people of the land are being driven out. They're being vomited out before the Israelites because of those vile practices. The worst of which we can point to is certainly giving over their children to be burned by fire in an act of worship to their gods. This is something that Yahweh hates, and it's abomination that they practice. Well, if Israel is going to display its Yahweh's righteousness before all nations, that's their job. That's their commission in Exodus 19, 5 and 6. There will be a kingdom of priests displaying the righteousness of God before all nations. If they're going to do that, they must be protected from the influence of that wicked culture. And that's another purpose for the conquest. We're told that Israel is being protected from that apostasy. Look at Exodus 23. You shall make no covenant with the Canaanites in the land. Rather, you shall drive them out, lest they make you sin against me and serve their gods. Deuteronomy chapter 7. Let's look at this one as well. Make no covenant with them. Show them no mercy. Because if you do, if you intermarry with them, they would turn you away from following me, and you would serve their gods in the way that they serve their gods, offering your children to be burnt by fire. Rather, you should devote them to complete destruction so that they may not teach you to do according to their abominable practices that they do for their gods, and thereby sin against the Lord your God. A final point on this subject before we move on and continue to work through these chapters. God does not play favorites. If Israel were to adopt the same abominable practices that the Canaanites have been doing for centuries at this point, then they would experience the same consequences. They themselves would be vomited out of the land. And of course, that's exactly what happens in 1 Kings 17. Israel is vomited from the lands. In 2 Kings 25, Judah is vomited from out of the lands, from following the gods of the people around them. Now, this sobering point is illustrated for us in the next narrative, the battle against Ai in Joshua 7 and 8. So let's return now to our discussion of Jericho and Ai. After Israel's defeat of Jericho, they're going to continue to push into the heart of the land of Canaan. Let me show you a little picture here. So they cross from Shittim, east of the Jordan River, into Jericho. And they defeat Jericho. Now they're going to push into the city of Ai. Let's conquer Ai next. It is about 10 miles away from Jericho. It's pretty close. However, the city of Ai is nothing like the city of Jericho. On the one hand, Jericho is huge. It's got big walls all around it. But we're told several times that the city of Ai is small. It's pitiful. The word Ai actually means ruin. It is a city that is called ruin. It's so small and pathetic. And therefore, Joshua's soldiers who go out and kind of spy it out, they say, oh, this city is a pushover. Just send about 3,000 men out to battle against this city. Don't send all of Israel up. However, those 3,000 men are beaten so badly that Israel, they run back to Gilgal, where the rest of the Israelites are camped, and it says that their hearts melted and they became like water. So what happened? Why was Israel defeated so badly? And that's exactly what Joshua asks God, and this is how God answers. Joshua chapter 7. Let's look at verse 12. God tells Joshua that Israel cannot stand before their enemies because they have taken some of the devoted things, and in so doing, they have become devoted for destruction. Isn't that interesting? They took some of the devoted things, and therefore they became devoted for destruction. And that's just one of the rules of holy war, that particular unique kind of military conflict. And we just learned about, one of the rules: you must devote the population to destruction, that it may not corrupt you religiously. And of course, this is going to involve the tearing down of shrines and foreign places of worship. Let's see that. Demolish all pagan places of worship. You shall tear down their altars, break their pillars, cut down their asherim, destroy all their figured stones, metal images, high places, idols must be torn down. And another element of holy war is God's promise to fight for the people. Let's scroll down to page 3 here, where we're told that Yahweh is the one who does the fighting. And look how he fights. It's kind of interesting. I will send my terror before you. I will send hornets from before you. Yahweh will fight for you. He will throw down large stones from heaven. This is from Joshua chapter 10. And we're told in that chapter that there were more men who died because of the hailstones than those that Israel personally killed with the sword. And as a result of Yahweh's personal engagement in the battle, Israel's success is guaranteed. They will win the battle no matter what. Take a look at this. This is fascinating. So this is back in Numbers chapter 31 and Israel's conflict against Midian. And look what it says. They sent 12,000 men to fight against the Midianites. And then the officers who were over the army, they came to Moses and like, Moses, you will not believe this. Your servants, we've counted all the men of war who were under our command, all 12,000 of them after the battle, and there's not a man missing. No one died. That's incredible. It doesn't make any sense. 12,000 people, not a man dies. However, that was not the case for Israel's battle against Ai. Only 3,000 men went against the battle of Ai, and yet it says here that about 36 of Israelite soldiers were killed. Now, ordinarily, you think, you send out 3,000 people, 36 people died. That seems like an acceptable level of casualties, but not in holy war. If even one person were to die from the Israelite army, that would be proof that God is not on their side. And this principle, it's captured in the expression, violators become the enemy. Achan, he violated the rules of holy war, and therefore he became Yahweh's enemy. You shall not covet the silver or gold, which is to be devoted to the Lord, lest you become devoted for destruction like the silver and the gold. And so we're told explicitly, Achan took what was devoted, and therefore Achan became devoted for destruction. However, once that happened, once Achan was executed, then after that, Israel prevails. They're told to go back and fight against Ai again. And God, he continues to fight for Israel. He fought against them the first time, but now he fights for them. And this battle against Ai, the second one, is characterized by the miraculous. Just like Moses held up his staff when they were battling the Amalekites in Exodus 17, so Joshua holds up his javelin here in the battle against Ai in chapter 8. And as long as he does, they are victorious. However, this battle against Ai, even though they won, it's still so different from the battle against Jericho. Against Jericho, man, they hardly did anything. But against Ai, it required this elaborate battle plan. Let me show you a little picture of that elaborate battle plan, which was required in order to defeat Ai. So against Jericho, the Israelites, they just crossed the river and they walked around it in a circle a few times, right? That's all that was required. But against Ai, first they had to send this massive force, which pretended to be defeated, and then it ran back to Gilgal, and there were two ambushing forces, one from the north and one from the south, that entered into the city and burned it, and then the main force can return to defeat all of the soldiers from Ai that left the city. It's this very elaborate plan, and it's curious. It makes you wonder if the sin of Israel and the sin of Achan specifically, if that somehow changed the fabric of the conquest, such that after that kind of fall narrative in the land, the rest of the conquest, it's not going to go like what it should have. I mean, maybe every single battle, Israel will just walk up to the next city and then blow their trumpets, walk around it in circles, and then the battle would be theirs, but not the case anymore. However, let's see, where should we go? Okay. Now, some have identified this chapter, chapter 8, as marking a turning point in the book of Joshua. And Old Testament scholar David Dorsey is one of those. He proposes that chapters 1 through 8 is one unit, and chapters 9 through 12 is another unit. And he claims that he has identified a chiasm in each of these sections. Let me show you some of his work, a chart which I kind of put together based on his work. So here's Joshua 1 to 8. And according to Dorsey, at the very center of this chiasm is Israel's worship of Yahweh in the land. They keep the Passover. They are religiously purified and cleansed via circumcision here in the beginning of chapter 5. And then on either side of this center, we have this miraculous crossing where Israel crosses the waters of the Jordan following the priests who bear the ark. And now Israel is going to cross over the walls of Jericho, still following priests who are carrying the ark. Isn't that interesting? And then on either side of that, we have this contrast between a believing Canaanite, Rahab, and an unbelieving Israelite, an Achan. And in both cases, Achan, he is going to hide the devoted things in his tent. But Rahab, on the other hand, she is going to hide the spies on the roof of her house. How curious. And then the outer section, section A, at the beginning and at the end of this section, is going to demonstrate that the primary point and the primary purpose and message of the book is that Israel's success in the land is contingent upon its obedience to the law of Moses as delivered through Yahweh. Now, this faithfulness to the law of Moses, it is demonstrated in Israel's journey from Ai, kind of in the center section of Israel, up north to the city of Shechem, where they're going to practice a covenant renewal ceremony up at Mount Ebal. And let's look at another map to see how far they had to travel to get there. So here is our battle. Oops. Here we are. Here is our battle against Ai again. And now let's look at the next image. Here's that same battle here. And they're going to go way up to Shechem, a city that lies in between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And it is at this location where they are going to renew the covenant before Yahweh. And why are they going to do this? Well, maybe because of the sin of Achan. It makes sense to renew the covenant after that fall moment in the land. But the main reason they're going all the way up here to Shechem is because Moses told them to in the book of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 27. Let's take a look at this. Let's go down to page 3, the bottom of page 3. Here we are. So Moses commanded the people here in Deuteronomy 27, you shall go to Mount Ebal and build an altar. And so Joshua, in Joshua chapter 8, he went to Mount Ebal and he built an altar, just as Moses, the servant of Yahweh, commanded the people. That's what he did. And continuing in Deuteronomy 27, Moses charged the people. Half of them should go up to Mount Gerizim, the other half should go up to Mount Ebal, and they are declare the words of God from those two mountains. And of course, that's exactly what Joshua did. He took half the people and they went up Gerizim, the other half went up Ebal. And this was just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. Now, this must have been a pretty impressive ceremony. We're helped with a couple of pictures here of the two mountains, Gerizim and Ebal and Shechem in between. And they're literally shouting back and forth between these two mountains, the words of curse and the words of blessing. Pretty interesting. Well, following this ceremony, way up north in Shechem, Joshua and his crew are going to come back south to Gilgal. And Gilgal, it's right across the Jordan River from Shittim. It's kind of between the Jordan and Jericho. And that kind of becomes Joshua's base of operations in the Promised Land. And when he returns to Gilgal, he is met by a group of Gentiles claiming to be from far away. These, of course, they weren't from far away, by the way. These are Gibeonites. And Gibeon is just about 10 miles away from Ai. But they claim to be from far away. They put on all this ragged clothing saying, we've been traveling for so long. Look, our bread is crumbly. We're from far away, and we have heard of all that Yahweh did against Jericho and Ai and against Sihon and Og. Therefore, come and make a covenant with us. And of course, Israel shouldn't have entered into a covenant with them. They didn't ask God whether are they really from far away. They didn't consult Yahweh. However, despite this deception, this moment still demonstrates both an awareness of and at least an attempt to follow the laws of Moses. Now, let me show you what I mean. We have an entire chapter in the Bible, Deuteronomy specifically, which is devoted to Israel's foreign policy when they're battling the nations. And this is in Deuteronomy chapter 20. And it says there's two different modes of warfare. Method 1, this is for everyone who is far away from you. Everyone who is far away from you with these nations, make peace with them. When you draw near to the city, offer terms of peace with them. But for those cities that are close, for the cities that are in the land of Canaan, you can't do that. You got to save alive nothing that breathes. You got to devote them to destruction. And let's see. Somehow, the Gibeonites, it's as if they were aware of this law in Deuteronomy 20, or perhaps at least they were aware of Israel's intentions within the land. And therefore, 3 times it's emphasized, we've come from a distant country. And then Israel asks, well, maybe you live among us. And they say, no, we come from a very distant country. Therefore, please make peace with us. It's so interesting, isn't it? It's as if the book of Joshua has this very conscious awareness of the Torah, of the book of Deuteronomy, and it's in this constant conversation where it's dropping these little hints, saying like, the reason I'm including this little detail is because it is in accordance with the law of Moses as recorded in the book of Deuteronomy and elsewhere. Now, however, despite that, we are told explicitly that the Gibeonites, they were among the people group known as the Hivites. And the Hivites are one of those 7 nations that Israel is told to drive out from the land of Canaan. I mean, it's even in chapter 3, verse 10, Israel is told that they must drive out the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, and the Hivites. So, as a result of Israel's covenant with the Hivites, they are now forced to defend a city that they should have destroyed. Here in chapter 10, this 5-king coalition comes and attacks the city of Gibeon. And Israel is forced to come to its rescue. Let me show you a couple maps of this moment. So here we are. All right, so Israel is at Gilgal, and they get word that the Gibeonites are under attack. They're under an attack by 5 kings of Canaanites from the south. Here they are. The Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, located right here, he sends word to Hoham, king of Hebron, down here, and also the king of Jarmuth, and the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, and all these 5 kings, they come up north to attack Gibeon. And however, despite Israel's negligence to seek Yahweh in this moment and ask for his wisdom, Yahweh is still going to honor their covenant with Gibeon by coming to their rescue. He's even going to make the sun stand still in order for Joshua to defeat his enemies. A fascinating passage. Well, having defeated all of these kings, these 5 kings who come up to Gibeon and attack it, Joshua defeats those kings, and then he's going to quickly dive south in order to capture those kings' cities. And those battles are summarized in chapter 10, this little conquest summary, as a defeat of 7 different cities. This number 7, of course, is so important in the Bible. And we're told that the second half of chapter 10 in Joshua of his defeat of 7 additional cities there in the south. Here we are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Magdala and Libnah, Lachish, Gezer, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir. You can see kind of how it all kind of forms a little circle, where after the kings are defeated at Gibeon, then Joshua goes south to Magdala, Libnah, Lachish, and then Gezer. He comes down to attempt to defend Lachish, but he's defeated as well. Then he goes to Eglon, Hebron, Debir, and returns to their command center, their headquarters, there in Gilgal. Well, I think that this southern campaign, as it's called, is worth another look. But this time, let's do it in 3D. Why don't we? This is a diagram, a picture put together by the Holman Bible Atlas. I love that resource. And don't you like this kind of 3 dimensions where you can see the mountains a little bit more clearly than you can on a 2-dimensional surface. So they start in Shittim, they cross to Jericho, they defeat Ai, then they defend Gibeon, and then after defending Gibeon, they go south and take this southern land right here, which will in the future become the land of Judah. A lot of time is devoted to this land, which will be Judah's in the future. Well, following this plunge into the center of the land of Canaan, the rest of the conquest of Canaan, it's divided into 2 separate campaigns. It's divided into a southern campaign and a northern campaign. Now, let me show you another map that kind of shows you a good overview of these 2 campaigns. Let's go right here. Okay, so here's the southern campaign and here's the northern campaign. And of course, we cross the Jordan, defeat Jericho, Ai, defend Gibeon, and then we run here to the south. And then, starting in chapter 11, we're going to go way up to the north, here above the Sea of Galilee, where the second phase of Israel's conquest is going to take place. Now, curiously, the Bible is so intentional, everything that it does. It's amazing. These 2 conquests are set parallel to one another. There are many explicit similarities between southern and northern campaigns. Both campaigns are going to start by a 5-king coalition which attacks Israel. And then in both cases, Joshua is given a divine assurance where he says, "Do not fear them, Joshua, for I have given them into your hand." And then following that assurance, Joshua launches a surprise attack. Look at the specific language that's used to describe this surprise attack of Joshua. So here's this southern and northern campaign. And after Joshua gets this divine assurance, it says that Joshua came upon them suddenly in chapter 10. He struck them, chased them as far as these locations. And then in chapter 11, Joshua came against them suddenly, and he struck them, he chased them as far as Great Sidon and the valley of Mizpah. Well, again, I think that this let's see. Oh, yes, this is important as well. Both of these campaigns also conclude with a conquest summary, summarizing everything that Joshua did in the south and then in the north, where it says that Joshua took all of the land, the hill country, the Negev, the land of Goshen, the lowland, Arabah, the hill country of Israel, and its lowland, from this mountain all the way up to this other mountain. Now, these kind of summaries are pretty frequent in the book of Joshua, and they can be a little bit, your eyes can kind of glaze over, like, I don't know where any of these places are. I want to change that for you. Here is a little picture that I found online, which is fabulous. It really helps to you identify all these different locations. So this is the conquest summary in Joshua 11, where it says that Joshua took all the land. He took the hill country. That's right here. And he took the Negev down in the south. Then he took the lowland. Now, you'll notice how the hill country is kind of in the center strip of Israel, and then the lowland, it makes sense, is right there by the water. Hill country, lowland. But what's curious is that there's both a hill country in the south and there's the hill country of Israel and the lowland of Israel. It's as if the author of Joshua is aware that at one point in the future, Israel is going to divide between north and south, and therefore it makes sense for us to call it the hill country of Israel, the northern tribes, and their own lowland. And of course, following the Jordan River, we have an area called the Arabah. All very interesting. Well, I think why don't we take another look at the northern campaign as well. This is a great little diagram here. And Joshua in chapter 11, he's going to go way up north from Gilgal. And when he does, he is going to be met by a 5-king coalition led by Jabin, king of Hazor. That's the big bad city in the north. And he's going to call all of his buddies. He's going to call the king of Madon. He's going to call the king of Shimron. He's going to call the king of, this is a hard one to pronounce, Akshvath. And then the kings who are in Naphoth Dor in the west, it says, and the land of Mizpah up in the north. And they're all going to gather to the waters of Merom. And that's where they are going to be suddenly defeated by Joshua in a surprise attack. And it says that they are routed and they are chased as far as Great Sidon in the north. And here's another great picture. Don't you love that? It kind of makes sense. Well, they probably took the route against or on the coast, and they came together to Merom, where they're defeated. I love these little pictures. So helpful. Well, again, I cannot say enough that even Joshua's execution of the kings, even that is in specific obedience to the law of Moses. It's so interesting. Let's jump back to that chart again, which is going to chart Joshua's obedience to the law of Yahweh delivered to Moses. Let's turn our attention now to page 4. This is such a long document. I always have to remind myself, what page am I on? So Joshua, what does he do? He kills these 5 kings, the 5 kings who made a coalition together and fought against Gibeon in chapter 10. He struck them with the sword, put them to death, and then he hanged them on 5 trees, and he did so until evening. And then at the time of the going down of the sun, then he took them down from the trees, threw them in a cave. Why is this little detail included? For a very specific reason, to demonstrate the faithfulness of Yahweh to the book of the law. In Deuteronomy 21, Moses commands that if a person who's committed a crime punishable by death, you will hang him on a tree, but his body should not remain on that tree all night. You must bury him that same day. Joshua threw him in a cave. Again, why do we include that small detail? It's to note Joshua's obedience to the smallest detail of the law. Well, the book of Joshua is going to conclude its record of the conquest of Canaan with a list of kings that Joshua defeats in the land. And it appears that this list is both comprehensive and chronological. Take a look at another chart, a chart of which documents all 31, here we are, all 31 kings that Joshua defeats in the land. And it's going to start, the first two kings on the list are the two kings over the cities in the center of Israel, what we call the central campaign. And then it moves to the southern campaign. Let's make this a little bit smaller so we can see more of that map. That's where the real payoff is here. And these initial kings, these are all kings that were part of the southern coalition. See this? The king of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, Eglon, all these were part of that southern campaign. That was kind of the first thing that Israel did after the defeat of Ai. And then it's going to move, after it lists all of these kings, it's going to move to the north. And again, it's going to start with the northern coalition. The initial kings here are all those who were part of that northern coalition. This is a fantastic little picture put together by the ESV Study Bible, and I just threw some numbers on there to help link each defeated king in order as presented in Joshua chapter 12. Well, now that we've finally reached Joshua chapter 12, we can consult again David Dorsey and ask him, so Mr. Dorsey, or should I say Dr. Dorsey, what structure do you have for us for chapters 9 to 12? And of course, he would respond by saying, I have a chiasm for you. Let me show you. It's always worth consulting Mr. David Dorsey. He's oh so helpful. So here we are. So this is his chiasm for 1 to 8. Look at his chiasm for 9 to 12. I'll make this a little bit bigger. It has 115. Perfect. Okay. So, of course, Dorsey identifies the parallels between the southern campaign and the northern campaign. Those are very obvious. But then bracketing these two campaigns, we have Israel making peace with the Gibeonites, and then this moment is going to be referenced again on the other side of the northern campaign. There was not a city that made peace with Israel except the inhabitants of Gibeon. Curious, we have this little line connecting these two stories. And then on the outside of this, the outer sections of this chiasm, all right, that's good. We have this curious use of the Hebrew word for one. It's the word echad, where in chapter 9, verse 2, it says that all the kings gathered as one, echad, to fight against Joshua. And then that word echad is repeated 31 times in Joshua chapter 12, where it lists every single king that Joshua defeated. He defeated the king of Jericho, one. He defeated the king of Ai, one. He defeated the king of Bethel, one. So it seems like perhaps we're linking those two sections with that section, or with that word. Well, this is also very interesting. David Dorsey is going to go on to claim that the two chiasms here in chapters 1 through 8 and 9 through 12, each of these chiasms matches point for point in two parallel columns. This gets pretty wild at this point. Let's do 105, make it a little bit bigger. So take a look at this. It's quite fascinating. Here in chapter 2 and in chapter 9, we have two believing Canaanites are spared. Rahab is spared. Then the Gideonites are spared. After this, we have two miracles of stopping. It's this word amad, where God, he made the waters stand still or stop, the waters of the Jordan for Israel to go across. And then he's going to make the sun amad. It's going to make the sun stand still or stop in the sky. Following this, we have these two instances. It's use of this kind of rare word where the reproach of Israel is rolled away, just like Joshua rolls a stone against a cave to keep the kings inside of this. And then after that, we have the city of Jericho is burned in chapter 6, and then the city of Hazor is burned. And this is curious because there's only 3 cities in the book of Joshua that are burned with fire, and these 2 cities are, as represented as being parallel in these 2 columns, they are both burned. And this is going to take place in chapter 11. Now, this chapter, the very end of this chapter, chapter 11, verse 23, is going to conclude with a statement summarizing the conquest and looking forward to what is going to happen next in the book of Joshua. It says that the land had rest from war, and Joshua gave the land for an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal allotments, which are described in Joshua 13 to 21, which we'll take a look at next.